Call the meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority to order. Would you please call the roll, Susan?
Yes, thank you. This is the meeting of the DDA, November 7th, 2012. Roll call, Newcomb Clark. Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunsel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heapshire.
Here.
Jill Lowenstein.
Here.
John Boyd.
Here.
Nader Nassif.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is audience participation, and Elmer White has signed up. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Yes. I want to speak to a topic that I'm hopeful you will put on your agenda for your retreat that is later this month. And I'm suggesting that possibly the program could be up and running by next September with a small student body of 6 to 12 students. We know the three basics are food, clothing, and shelter. We know that our economy is turning from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. Our wonderful Ann Arbor Observer that I learned so much from, one of the issues that just out speaks to the St. Andrews breakfast program for indigent homeless people that has come under new management. It's got a tremendous organization over at St. Andrews. The other one on page 43 speaks of the young chef who came to Ann Arbor from Ecuador and is now serving fine food at what most of us remember as the Parthenon that the Gavas brothers ran. That was my #1 favorite restaurant downtown. And it occurred to me that we have schools of architecture for shelter and schools of design for clothing, but how do we train people in the food services? And don't say, well, we've got the culinary program at Washtenaw Community College and the culinary program at Schoolcraft. Those programs, as good as they are, speak to being able to put a lot of plates out on the tables at banquets. They speak to cafeteria style, buffet style, restaurants that I say with a small R. I frequently eat at Applebee's up on Green Road in Plymouth. Very nice restaurant, but basically the Applebee menu is how many different ways can we prepare chicken breast? Well, what toppings can we put on it? Now, the restaurants with a capital R are downtown Ann Arbor. They become a destination for people from Wayne and Oakland and surrounding counties. How do we train the people that prepare that food that is individual order, probably from a short menu that changes from week to week? How do they get trained? Is it an apprenticeship program? And some of you know the restaurant profession better than I do. But is it just happenstance? Why not have, you've heard of the CIA, how about the CIAA, the Culinary Institute of Ann Arbor, to become the best culinary institute between Montreal and San Francisco? Now the word cuisine, most of us think of it, and I always thought of it as, well, it's the way the French cook food with a lot of butter. Actually, you look it up, the definition of cuisine is the customary foods of a region using ingredients from the region, okay? So I see the possibility of building a partnership of food gatherers, St. Andrews program, the Delonis Center, and sponsors of CIAA who would make charitable contributions to a nonprofit. That money would be used to purchase the food that the students would use to prepare. This could be, I think, a great thing for the community. And can you imagine the very good publicity it would engender probably nationwide for DDA Ann Arbor? Now, let me mention also, if you go online and you look up l'école de la Cordon Bleu de Paris, you will find that they are franchising into the U.S. So Cordon Bleu has for-profit institutes all over the country, as does Culinary Arts Institute of New York. So hope you put it on your agenda for the retreat.
Thank you, Mr. White. The next are reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter.
Last night's meeting of the Downtown Area Citizen Advisory Council was almost entirely devoted to a discussion of the merits and the problems of the two 14-story student housing developments recently proposed in the downtown. One at 624 Church Street, above the Pizza House, the other at 401 413 East Huron, just to the west of Sloan Plaza. Since our last meeting, that is the DDA meeting, both of these projects have gone before the Design Guidelines Review Board, and both have had public participation meetings. And at those public meetings, the Design Review Board and Community Committee treated the Pizza House development very gently, supporting the DDA's willingness to accept the developer's request to follow a contribution in lieu of process to provide off-street parking. Of course, we in the Citizens Council also support that direction. The major criticism of the project's design was that it looked a lot like Zaragoza 1 and also Zaragoza West, and perhaps that it might be a bit more innovative, which is always to be encouraged. In the case of the proposed development for 401 and 413 East Huron, the reaction from the Design Review Board, as well as the public, was that this project needed to be redesigned. Nobody likes this project. To its credit, the developers did make some small changes in the design in time for the public participation meeting, but those community members present did not consider that nearly enough. The next morning, 4 members of the development team met at Sloan Plaza with 7 members of the Downtown Design Guidelines Citizens Review Committee. That's an independent group made up of the 8 near downtown and downtown groups, residential organizations. That's the group actually that helped to put together the design guidelines and push for the Design Review Board. It included this time, as a part of it, former Dean of U of M's College of Architecture and Urban Planning, Doug Kelbaugh. The meeting overlooking the site from the 8th floor penthouse windows of Sloan Plaza was really very cordial. But the message was clearly aligned with the design guidelines and community sentiment. The building's massive and dark, massive presence on Huron and Division encroached on the street's view and pedestrian corridor. The bulk needed to be reduced and redistributed to allow sunlight to the north and an improved pedestrian experience on Huron and Division. The project was simply trying to cram too much on that site. The developers were encouraged to move their elevator, lobby, and height to the prominent and important southwest corner of the building. Perhaps a planned project approach should be considered to celebrate that prominent corner, and maybe on the corner they could even go higher if they could improve the nature of the design of the building. That to show a greater respect for the character area in which it's located, which they were mistaken on when they originally developed the project, thinking that they wanted to design a building that related to the Justice Building and City Hall, which is not a part of the character area in that direction. Most people would not want a building in that location, which was designed to somehow or other match our lovely City Hall and our new Justice Building. But what we want really is that we move in a direction in which it really shows a greater respect for the building, for the area, as well as the historic and residential neighborhood to the north. Now, that meeting was followed by 2 others the next morning, both with Mayor Heefcha, one with the neighborhood group and one with the developers in separate sorts of gatherings. And our goal at that particular point, those of us who were in the neighborhood group, is to make the project better before it ever gets to the Planning Commission. And we hope that a part of the Planning Commission's public hearing will closely look at the ways in which this project is sought to follow our adopted downtown design guidelines. Now, we know we have voluntary, not mandatory guidelines, but nonetheless, in the process, really, we should all be looking at the nature of what we're talking about when we're talking about good design. Well, that's something to learn. We can all discuss it. The developers are doing that. And of course, the developers are also looking at this as not just the first project in downtown. They're looking at the DDA and the future of the approaching William Street direction. They'd like to be a part of that in terms of the nature of their future development. And our goal is to make this project as good as it can possibly be. And we hope that we can strengthen the possibility of their doing something else in Ann Arbor with a more successful project on East Huron Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, the next item are communications from DDA members. Any members who wish to communicate? Seeing none, I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the October 3rd meeting. So moved. Support?
Support.
Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, minutes are approved. Subcommittee reports, we will start with the Partnerships Economic Development. Sandy's not here, so you're on, Joan.
That's Sandy. I'll give you an update on the connecting William Street, and it really is that we have completed our public outreach phase. And so I can give you an overview of that, some of which we talked about in our last meetings as well. Total of 20 events held August through October. And the formats were traditional public meetings, webinars, and small group presentations. Over 170 people participated in this. And at each meeting, some history and context was provided for people, draft scenarios were presented, and feedback on various components, as well as general thoughts were collected. And so we've collected feedback and summarized it in a couple of ways. One is public meeting feedback, and those are public comments captured by the DDA staff. And feedback in a summary form, and that's going to be available on the web pretty soon. It's now all being kind of digested by our staff. And so we met in October to start looking at the feedback and thinking about what the draft recommendations should be. The staff and our consultant have been working on those. And on this coming Monday, our Leadership and Outreach Committee is going to meet at 3 p.m. Anybody is welcome to attend that. I think this is going to be probably one of our more important meetings because we're really going to look at the recommendations for what our final recommendations are going to be. And we're going to see a draft of the presentation that will ultimately be made to council. So this will be the time when we really hash through a lot of these things, and it's pretty exciting that we're finally getting to the point of having some recommendations on all of the connecting William Street sites. That's Monday at 3 p.m. right here.
Thank you. And your next meeting is Wednesday, November 14th.
That's right, 9
a.m.
a.m.
for partnerships. Thank you, Joan. Okay, Operations Committee, Roger Hewitt. Got some financial reports here.
Turn to, I believe it's page 12, the quarterly financial report. I'd like to preface this by saying that this budget was anticipated of having the parking structure, all parking structure payments completed in the previous fiscal year. Even though we knew that wasn't going to take place, we had placed them in that previous fiscal year, so we were sure that we did not have a negative fund balance at the end of the year, as is required by law. So this report is probably not overly helpful at this point because all those expenses that were, a number of expenses attached to that project that were budgeted last year are actually going to end up in this current fiscal year. I would anticipate that once we have all the bills in on the Library Lane parking structure and the 5th and Division projects, we will come to the board with a budget revision that will reflect more accurately what our actual expenditures have been. Once those projects are completed, hopefully within the next 3 months. But I'll go through this briefly with that proviso that this is not going to be particularly helpful until we actually end up doing a budget revision. If you look at the first two columns, most of our revenue is in, and it is very close to almost exactly what we had budgeted year to date. You can see at year end we anticipate being at about 3.9 million. We're at about 3.5 million right now. Operating expenses are down at this point. That is largely due to the money that we are going to be paying out into the for the parking structure and the 5th and Division projects. But we anticipate at year end that will be very close to what we had budgeted. Capital expenses, we have we're going to complete our curb ramp project, making all the curb ramps within the DDA area compliant with ADA requirements. So we had planned on putting that off a little bit. We were going to probably complete that in this fiscal year. But overall, we anticipate that we're going to be very close to our anticipated budget once everything is said and done. Similar with parking, income is slightly up over what we anticipated, up about $400,000, excuse me, about $100,000 so far. Anticipated maybe $400,000. Again, parking revenues remain strong, and we anticipate we will be right on budget. We are under budget at the moment on both operating expenses and on direct parking expenses, but again, we anticipate at the end of the year we will be, once the library lane is completed and we've adjusted the budget, we should be right where we anticipated. Parking maintenance, we have not transferred any money in yet. A large chunk of what we have paid out, that $2.1 million, is again related to the underground parking structure, but we will be doing transfers into that fund to cover those amounts. And housing, the Near North project appears not to be going forward under this year, although we had budgeted in there. We have put in the Baker Commons roof replacement project in there, as well as the Village Green affordable housing part. So we will probably be under budget on our expenses in housing, assuming the Village Green project is completed by the end of this fiscal year. So again, it's a little unclear exactly what these numbers will look like in 6 months from now, but 3 to 6 months. But I think we come with a budget revision, it will be a lot clearer where we're ending up. But overall, our financial position and our fund balances are better than we thought they would be at the end of this project. Very encouragingly in better shape than we had probably anticipated a couple years ago. The next page you can see graphically where we are. The dark line being actual versus budgeted. Again, most of our TIF income is in. Operating expenses, again, are a small portion so far. Parking should be about 25% because we're in the first quarter, and it is right about, just about at that number. Direct parking is actually, again, a little lower than anticipated at this point, at least as budgeted. So, if there are questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them, probably with Joe's assistance if necessary. If we want to move on to just a quick look at where our fund balances are. On page 14, you can see our TIF fund balance is at $6.8 million. On page 16, our housing fund balance is just a little over $1 million. And our parking fund balance is about $5 million. And parking maintenance is a negative about $500,000 because we have not transferred money into that as yet. And certainly those numbers are going to be coming down when we make all the final payments to Chrisman and the other contractors involved in the underground structure. But everything looks like we are going to have a fairly healthy fund balance when all is said and done, which we were not at all sure about, I'd say, a couple years ago, and we feel we've come out of this better than we thought we would. The overall expenses look like they're going to be right in line with what we anticipated them being, and really the growth has been in increased usage in the parking system and increased parking rates. The combination has really helped keep our fund balances higher than we had originally anticipated going into the project. So again, we'll have accurate numbers probably hopefully the next 3 months, but that's the overview right now.
Anything else?
I'll give our parking report. We go to page 22. Just looking overall, in the month of September versus the previous September, revenues were only up a little over 3%, which has to do, and actually hourly patrons, number of tickets pulled was actually down. Again, there are always month-to-month variations as you go through the year. The biggest reason on this is one, we had one less business day in September. In September than we did the previous year. In September last year,
Many
at
fewer
4 home football games. Yeah. And I had similar reflective sales because of the 4 home football games a year ago. So there will always be some variations, and again, local events, particularly football games, do have an impact. If you look at the quarterly numbers, again, our number of hourly patrons is down, but revenues are a pretty strong 13% increase over the previous quarter. Again, very, very strong growth in revenues. Again, part of this is rate increases, but definitely part of it is increased usage. So although hourly patrons, the number of tickets pulled might be down, the length of stay of those hourly patrons, plus the use of parking meters and surface lots, parking meters, has increased. So, and that's my report.
Any questions? Thank you, Roger.
Sure.
Comprehensive as always. John Moab, you're up on responding to concerns about bikes on sidewalks.
Thank you very much. Amber and I got together to talk through some of the basic parameters of the issue, and the issue being I think what's perceived as mainly a potential safety challenge of bikes on sidewalks downtown. And so we talked about where are the problem areas, what are the streets, and I think most of us know between South Hugh and State Street, Main Street, Liberty, there's sort of obvious ones. It's not really all of downtown by any means. So one was to talk about the perceived areas of potential problem. The other thing that Amber had done is she's pulled together a fair amount of information, including our ordinance information, our maps of bike routes and sharrows and all those sorts of things, and also what other communities are doing, which is all helpful because, ultimately, in my mind, there's sort of 3 elements to looking at it. One is what can be done with educating people, what can be done with enforcing ordinances, and what can be done to design better, to allow to resolve the problem or at least not exacerbate it. So I think that there are avenues to pursue, and I know that Susan's had some conversations too with the police department a little bit about ordinance enforcement. But one of the things that I think is a real challenge, and I'd be interested in anyone's ideas on this, is really trying to define the problem, in the sense that, as I understand it, the police department doesn't have record of people calling in complaints, for instance, about it, or there being a record of injuries of people, those sorts of things. So, there are things that people hear and feel about it, but what is the nature of the problem? And I think it's an odd one because there is the actual real safety issue of somebody coming out a door and getting hit by a bike, but there's also the perception of people walking down the street and a bike's bombing towards you. Are you just feeling endangered? And what does that mean? So that, in my mind, that's one of the real challenges of this, is really defining the problem and therefore how to resolve it. Because to ask the police to commit resources to enforcing is a real, that's an important thing to think about. And they're, based on my understanding of the ordinances, they're sort of different pieces that they can enforce. Some of which are more difficult than others. Some are pretty difficult if you're in a patrol car, and spotting someone on a bike. Is that an infraction? And so I think there's some really challenging practical aspects of enforcement. Education is an important one. I actually happened to have a chance to talk to Steve Dolan, the head of transportation for U of M, about it. We were meeting together, and I just asked him, do you see this as an issue on campus? Because obviously bikes use sidewalks a lot there. And he thinks of it as very much an education issue and a culture issue. Coming from Portland, that's sort of his take on it. So they don't seem to be very active in seeing it, A, as a problem on campus, or B, there being a good way to enforce it, if you will. So I don't know quite where that leaves us, is the long and the short of it. We can think about and talk about everything from signage to this, that, and the other thing, but my personal view is that, and this is maybe an unfair characterization, but it seems as though there's probably a likelihood that a pretty big percentage of folks who are riding a little bit recklessly on the sidewalks are, many of them are students, especially up by campus, I think. And how do you educate every year a whole new, thousands of people, and how do you do that? So anyway, that's laying out sort of as we're seeing it so far, sort of the nature of the problem. I don't know if either Susan or Amber have anything they want to add to it, but we're a little bit at a loss of kind of where to go without being able to better define the problem. And I certainly would look to anyone who might have some insight of how we can do that.
Any comments, maybe? So what can you do? Thank you, John.
All right. One last quick thing about the bike cage business. It's in the process of being designed, and we should be having some drawings and information available for the next operations committee.
Wonderful. And the next operations committee is?
November 28th, 11 a.m.
Thank you. Okay, other DDA business matters. We are having a retreat. Susan, would you like to give us more information about that?
Yes, I'm sure this is just absolutely what's on your calendar. So a week from this Friday, we will be at the former Carytown Bistro spot. It's hard to describe it, but it's the Zingerman Special Events spot, part of the Carytown area. Very comfortable setting. Jada and I went over there to take a look to see how things will work. We'll be in a large area in the back. If you remember the bistro, sort of the dark corners where you're at your table, very romantic. That's actually now brightly lit. That's where we're going to be doing our work. And the front part of it, which was as you entered, you were hanging out to jump ahead, if you were hanging out the bar to eaves, there's also that area there. So if you need to take a step away, there's a space for you to do that and feel comfortable. We're going to start right at 10:30. We're going to go through to 3:30. Carrie Sheldon has met with every one of you, I think, that have had time and have had an interest in meeting with her. She's also meeting with a number of stakeholders outside the DDA to try to get to a framework where we're going to work on, at that 10,000-foot level, where we are strategically as a DDA, what's most important to our downtown, what are the things that we should be doing and could be doing to help meet our mission, which is downtown private reinvestment and strengthening downtown. We have a chance to take a step back. This is the first time in my 17 years here at the DDA that we don't have the next big project. So it's as much for me as staff and maybe the rest of us as it may be for you as well, to really think about it, calibrating post-2008 recession, post-big parking garage construction. I mean, we've got a lot of things that have changed since the last time we really had a deep discussion, which goes back to 2003 with our renewal plan. So Carrie Sheldon is shaping an agenda that enables us to take a few minutes with ourselves as a group to explore those strategies we gave ourselves, and then to think really tactically, what are the best ways to meet our mission with specific areas of interest and areas of strength. We're really good at some things, and what are those things and how do we do more of that? And what are those things at the outer community, the economic development efforts that are happening around us, the city, the county, Spark, the university, what are the things that they need from us so that they can be successful? And we're going to spend some time in retreat exploring those things so we can help give ourselves direction for where we want to prioritize our energies and time. We're going to feed you because it's a Zingerman space. You're going to be well fed. But that doesn't mean we're not going to work you. As some of you were there, Joan and John know, I was going to cut your lunch break down from 15 minutes, even tighter. So you're going to be eating well, but you're going to be working hard. And I think we're going to be pleased with the outcome. So I'm glad you are all making time. I know it will be very effective for all of us to have this time together.
Great, thank you, Susan. Looking forward to it. Go ahead, John.
I know, I don't know if it was the last retreat or the one before that, where we had the little colored circles and we prioritized. Could we have a listing of those things and where they came out in that prioritization? So when you talk about future projects.
We could, and that said, we're going to try to hold back from specific projects as yet to get to the bigger questions, which is where are we really strong? So we had, for instance, a list of construction projects. We want to do these pedestrian improvements. We wanted to do these, water mains and alleys. The step back that I'm going to ask you guys to go through with me on this journey is we are really good at infrastructure. Let's really embrace that. That's something that we're very, very good at. And what is it that we do then follow from those discussions around those strategies? So we'll pull up those projects, but spend some time at the beginning really thinking about the areas that we're good at and why we want to continue to pursue those things. And if we're not good in certain areas, maybe there's some projects that or areas we just stop doing.
Anything else?
Briefly, I should have probably mentioned earlier that the connector study that we have supported, I believe, at the last meeting has been also funded now by City Council, and there was a meeting yesterday to discuss the first steps, which will be public process, and there are going to be a series of workshops in sort of public spaces the first part of December. We don't have the exact dates or locations, but one I know is probably going to be Briarwood Mall, and somewhere in the downtown, probably somewhere in the northeast side, and they're going to be very drop-in, or, as we talked about, in coffee shops while you're waiting in line, you can put some dots on maps on where you'd like to go or where you think it should go, areas where you have activities. So that's now starting to proceed, and the goal is to get as much community input as in broad-based input on what people, where people go, where they would like to see a mass transit system work. So I'll have more information in the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Roger.
you
Anything
know.
else? Is there anyone else from the audience who wishes to speak to us? Come up to the podium. Nancy Shore, get downtown.
Hi, it's Nancy from downtown. I'm going to put on my ATA hat right now. All of you should have received in your inboxes an invitation to the Blake Transit Center groundbreaking, and that is happening on November 19th at 11 o'clock at the Blake Transit Center. And we have a couple featured speakers, including our chairwoman here, Lee Gunn, as well as the mayor. And we've also invited a couple other elected officials to speak. We're going to have a groundbreaking, so make sure to be ready to grab a shovel and put on your hard hat. We're going to have a couple people. I know Susan has already graciously volunteered to be one of our groundbreakers. And it'll be a nice event. It's just a really great community event, and everybody's invited. And so we hope you all can attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
11:19 at what time?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Yep. And there'll be donuts and coffee. So if you need to pick me up, then we'll have that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Anything else?
I'm going to just...
Oh, Ray,
I'm just
back.
going to take advantage because I was told last night by the Citizens Advisory Council that I had to talk about something which was very important to them, and of course it wasn't enough time given what I had to cover. But last month we considered the nature of who we are as the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council and recognized the fact that the nature of what it is that our downtown interests goes beyond the downtown, just as it does for the DDA. And of course, last month what we did is consider what those were. Transportation being one of them, including connector sorts of issues, which go beyond the nature of the downtown. The future of the railroad and the station is something that we need to be involved in as downtown residents. But also, one of the things we're very much interested in is the future of North Main. Now, I'm on the downtown, the North Main Task Force, but also on the 721 Technical Committee, which is looking at the future, really, with regard to that space the city owns behind the community center. And we came through with our first commitment with regard to what it is that we thought that should be, which involved clearing the floodway and making the first effort, really, in the direction, really, of the Allen Creek connector, which will eventually connect to the river. But also the areas around that and deciding what we should do at least temporarily in those particular areas. But in considering that, what we did is we took a look, eventually we're going to have to get across Main Street, which isn't that easy in terms of where and how we're going to make that connection to the river. But also in considering that, the future of how we do connect to it relates to the properties across the street. Now, the DDA has supported affordable housing for a long time. And in North Main, what you did, I think it was $500,000 you came up with regard to give support to Avalon Housing to build that project on North Main. Well, it's not going to get built. But that money for affordable housing was there. We have been very disturbed, as have other people, the fact that we've had 8 houses that previously had affordable housing in them sitting vacant for 3 years. It's been a very negative sort of thing. At this particular point, it's been discovered with a new look at the floodway direction is that 4 of those houses are in the floodway. Nothing can be built in those areas. The city's already made a commitment to tear down houses in that area. But what we talked about last night is there's absolutely no reason, we feel, to tear down all 8 houses. There are 8 of them. 4 of those houses are perfectly rehabitable. And the reason why we got in the North Main thing was that the federal money wouldn't support rehabilitation. You had to build a new project. Well, now that's failed. What we'd like to do is to explore with the DDA's commitment to affordable housing the possibility of some money perhaps going to save one or all of those 4 houses on North Main. There's nothing wrong with them. It costs money to rehab them. That's what Avalon Housing has done in the past. And if there's any possibility of supporting them with some kind of money, and at the same time holding back the destruction of those houses, which seems just senseless at this point. Sitting with a big empty hole along North Main Street until God knows when with regard to the nature of our plans, because we at this point don't have any plans. In the meantime, from across the street, we're thinking about the nature of the direction we're going to go. That would help the North Main direction. At the same time, that might lead in the direction really of supporting more affordable housing downtown or near downtown. But I just wanted to pass that on. They asked me to do that last night, and I just didn't have time earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any further audience participation? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.